Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare.
So this is a point that I think is key to understanding the need, also within the Vaishnava community, to embark on the process of entrepreneurial and economic development. Now, once we understand this point and we embrace it wholeheartedly, we can depart from the idea that economic development and entrepreneurial activity are, spiritually speaking, counterproductive. On the other hand, it is also important to strike a balance. We can see that there are two extremes in a way in the world. There's Western society that has been extremely efficient and that has been extremely successful in promoting economic development through science, through technology, through an enormous emphasis on economic performance, such as the United States. And the United States is the most prosperous country in the world. The United States spends more on defense than all other countries in the world taken together. It's like $500 billion per year. The reason they can do that is because they have the economic prosperity to be able to do that. The downside with the Western point of view is that philosophically, because they are so focused on the short term, that sometimes the longer term vision, which is the spiritual vision, is being squeezed, and that's wrong. We become too focused on material prosperity, and we are not focusing sufficiently on spiritual development. On the other hand, we have another example, which is maybe traditionally you could say Indian culture, which is, let's say, Indian culture. Now, India is changing tremendously over the last 10 years. We are seeing enormous progress in India, also economically speaking, which I think is good because the country was not making it. But the time that I used to spend a lot of time in India, I was back in the 70s. India was known for being kind of apathetic. If you don't do it today, you'll do it tomorrow or next life. It's kind of a reincarnation thing. If my debtors won't pay me this life, I'll go back to them next life and everything's okay. So this kind of apathy and this kind of no pressure in terms of performing, that's also wrong. That's the other extreme. We have to strike the right balance here. The right balance means that on the one hand, we are focused on this life. This life is real. The material world is real. It's temporary, but it's real. And it's extremely important that in our path, in our process of the evolution of incarnations that we are going through, that in this process we live the life that we're living it properly, both on the material and the spiritual side, which means that we have to take this life serious. And we can't just think, the material world, it's all Maya, it's all, who cares, and it's one big mess anyway, so we just want to get out of here as fast as possible. If you think like that, that's wrong. That's definitely not the conducive spiritual mentality. The material world is real. If you look at Srila Prabhupada's example in terms of the way that he dealt with building, for instance, the ISKCON Society, which is an amazing achievement he did, all by himself. He created a worldwide movement that's been said many, many times. That even if you're not a devotee and you don't look at it from an inside point of view, if you look at it from an external, objective point of view, you can also conclude that what Srila Prabhupada did was amazing from a material point of view. He built an organization in less than 10 years that was stretching all the corners of the globe and that had thousands and thousands of people following him. So he was extremely serious about that. He didn't think, it's just the material is all Maya and who cares. No, he was really focused on doing it right. Doesn't mean that he always did it right. He was trying his best within the material world to build something that was extremely difficult. And through trial and error, he succeeded in doing that. But he was really serious about it. On the other hand, he also knew that the end result of what we're trying to do here is that we're trying to develop, we're trying to establish a society that has a spiritual goal, so that we can, in the end, improve the quality of life for everyone, both materially and spiritually. So, based on that example, the key thing is to find the balance between our spiritual life lives and our endeavors in this world. And if we succeed in doing that, which is not an easy thing, because the balancing act is always the most difficult thing to do. Just like in politics, we have seen the crisis in the 20th century, the struggle between communism and capitalism. It's basically been a struggle between trying to find the balance, because pure communism doesn't exist, pure capitalism doesn't exist. You know, the best economies today are the economies where the government has some central control, where the free markets can operate and the capitalist impulses can find their ways into the market. And if we can strike the good balance there, that's when we see societies become very successful from an economic point of view. So the balance is Achinsha Veda Veda Tattva. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he established the most brilliant philosophy that applies to all spheres of life, spiritually, philosophically, theologically, but also socially, politically, and economically. It is the balance between the material and the spiritual principle, the balance between centralization and decentralization, the balance between our individual endeavors to try to be successful in this world, but at the same time also recognizing our limitations. Many times failures are caused by over-endeavor, but failures are also caused by under-endeavor. So here too, in our personal lives, if you read all the management books of the great gurus, Tom Peters, whoever they are, and if you read them carefully, they always talk about this same principle, how to find that balance in management, that balance in achieving, and yet being able to renounce the attachment to achieving. It's a known fact that if you endeavor, and if you endeavor real hard, then you can get the maximum result. Yet, if you go over the border, if you go over the edge, you may spoil the whole thing. So the lessons, the knowledge that we have as Vaishnavas is so extremely valuable for moving forward this planet to a higher standard of living, both in the material and the spiritual plane. And the essence of that knowledge is understanding the right balance in all of our endeavors. And now we're focusing, of course, on economy, we're focusing on entrepreneurial activities, and I'll go into that in a bit more detail also in terms of my personal experiences and the things that I've done. But I just wanted to make that point philosophically so that we can lay the foundation for us as Vaishnavas working together in the future. And I see there's great possibilities. There are people here from all over the world, and if we combine and use our resources and the networks of communication and work together wherever we can, it's not going to happen from one day to the next. It's not a miracle cure, but if we have the strategy, if we have the vision, I see that here is a great platform through which we can achieve incredible things in the future based on the solid understanding of the philosophy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the things that Srila Prabhupada has taught us. So I first wanted to make that point about the relationship between economic development and spirituality and really driving home the issue that they are not mutually exclusive. In fact, they are totally complementary, and they must be in harmony if we want to accomplish our goals. What I've done over the last 20 years has really been building a business that started humbly with basically nothing, very little resources, and through, I must say, extremely hard work. And I'm not saying that to pat myself on the back, but it's really a fact, and most people that know me personally know that has been the case and still is the case. It's another thing that we have to realize. Devotees, I remember in the early ISKCON days, we always used to talk about, we got to make a lot of money, we just conquer the world in 80 days. You may remember all those phrases. And it's true, we were thinking like that. In a way, naive and idealistic. On the other hand, there was a tremendous drive. But it's not just the drive and the impatience and the impulse. It's something that requires something much deeper. It requires a concerted effort over a long period of time. And we're not talking about days, months, or weeks. We're talking about years or even decades. If I look back now, I started my business in 1986. Now it's 2006, so it's 20 years ago, and it's really taken, let's say at least 15 years to build a business that has some significance, that has an impact, and that has value. I started off in the one hand with two businesses. One was a computer business. The other one was a trust company that was offering financial services to multinationals that was based in Holland. Holland was and still is, a tax haven. Many multinationals would put up their holding companies, their financing and royalty companies in the Netherlands, and they would structure their international business in this way so they would get maximization of tax benefits. So I ran that business for 15 years until the middle of the 90s, and it was a successful business, but it was very hard work every day, and serving hundreds of clients around the world and making sure that they were happy, making sure they would pay their bills so I could pay my bills. And but at a certain point I got a little frustrated with it in the sense that I felt it was not, it was too limited. The type of work and the type of business I was doing was too administrative and too much based on just charging fees on the hour, which is a good business because you don't require much investment to start it, but on the other hand the growth is also fairly limited because you're simply limited by the amount of people that you can employ and of course by the amount of customers that you have. So in the middle of the 90s I decided to diversify and I set up an investment company that was part of Rig Investments, that's today the venture capital company. And one of the first things I got involved in is telecommunication. It's totally different business from financial services. But I thought telecommunication, I just had a kind of a feeling that it could be really interesting. Just around that time in '93, the European Union had made a decision to deregulate and liberalize the entire telecommunication industry. So I had the research done by a consultant, and he came back with a raving report about the telecoms market. And he said, if you make an investment in the telecommunication business now, and you can build a customer base, then in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, that could be extremely valuable. And that's exactly what happened. To my amazement, I made a small investment, then the investment got bigger and bigger, and within a year, I was able to take a company to the stock market in Scandinavia. And a year later, 1.5 years later, I was able to sell the company. And I started it with basically 3 people. And 3 years later, I was able to sell it. We got an offer from an American company called Global Telesystems, which was created by George Soros. And George Soros created that company in the early 90s after the fall of the Berlin Wall. He wanted to speed up the process of democratization and liberalization in East Bloc countries, in Russia and Eastern Europe. So he set up this telecom company that quickly became successful, turned into a commercial venture, and by the end of the 90s was a huge company that had billions and billions of dollars of assets. And they saw my company and they said, listen, we want to buy you guys, because my company at that time, after we floated it on the stock market, it had already a pan-European footprint. We were operating in 7 different countries in Europe. And they wanted to expand from Eastern Europe into Western Europe. And so they made an offer. And in the end, the offer was $500 million. We played hard to get. And they said, wow, $500 million. We think that's a little bit on the low side. But internally, we were jumping up and down in, you could say, material bliss. Because it was an amazing offer. I mean, a company that was barely 3 years old, from zero to that kind of valuation was just unbelievable. And I couldn't believe it. But it happened. And, when I think back, why did it happen? Again, working extremely hard, we had a really good team. But we were determined, this determination, and the whole team. I mean, I didn't do it by myself. We had a team, we had a board, we had all the shareholders, but that was you could say, the controlling shareholder in the company. And the commitment was really crucial, working day and night, the late hours to the weekends, and practically sacrificing everything. I mean, it was as simple as that. And we had a bit of good luck, too. Let's say, good karma. Of course, I couldn't speak to my board and say, gentlemen, I think we have good karma. I said, gentlemen, we were very lucky. But it was an amazing period also in history. The second half of the 90s, we all remember the stories of the internet bubble and telecommunication bubble and the billions and the billions of dollars that were invested from the financial institutions and the venture capital companies, especially in the United States. Silicon Valley was driving this whole thing in the world, and it had a major impact. And of course, a lot of the investments were also wrong, turned out to be bad. But and on the other hand, it was overall it was productive, because if you look at the world today, without these investments that were made in the second half of the 90s, we wouldn't have the kind of level of efficiency and e-commerce and internet and broadband and whole new methods of doing business together that we actually do have today, and that didn't exist 10 years ago. I mean, the internet didn't exist 10 years ago. I mean, it was there, but nobody was using it. So it has been very productive, and overall, economists have calculated that it has tremendously improved